Let me introduce my panel of esteemed four guests to my right and to my left. Starting out with my right, Min Zhu, who is the Deputy Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. He's also a former Deputy Governor of the People's Bank of China. Thank you so much for joining us. Jacob Frenkel, further to my right, who's the Chairman of JP Morgan Chase, one of the world's largest financial institutions. And to my left, we have Alejandro Jara, who joins us as the Deputy Director General of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and Romano Prodi, last but not least, who was the former Prime Minister of Italy. Let's start out with Min Zhu. First of all, obviously representing the International Monetary Fund, you've been very much in the eye of the limelight, let's say, perhaps even the eye of the storm, because you've been having to help so many countries that are having a hard time around the world, notably in Europe. Your main priority, you've been saying often, is to get growth going again, but you also acknowledge that that is probably one of the biggest challenges of our age.
Well, the main challenge you obviously laid out. One thing is our mandate to maintain global financial stability and economic stability. And a part of stability comes from the growth, because if you don't have growth, it's hard to have economic and financial stability. So we need to do both. And given currently the debt ratio is still way high, I just mentioned, with all these austerity programs in the advanced economy, for example, the debt ratio is still on upside, not on downside. We forecast the debt ratio to GDP probably will be stabilized in 2016. At that time, end up with 115% of GDP. So the debt ratio is still way high. So we have to cut the debts. We have to do the fiscal consolidation. But meanwhile, the growth is relatively weak. This year is a 3.25%, and lower than 4% last year. And advanced economy particularly weak, have only 1.5% GDP growth rates, and the European have a negative growth rate. It's run into a mild recession. So growth is always important. But I would like to emphasize, asking the message is not to do austerity or the growth. We need both.
Let me come to you, Romano Prodi. Obviously, as the former Prime Minister of Italy, Italy is one of those countries that people are becoming increasingly worried about their sort of debt to GDP ratio. How difficult is it when you're in a position of power, you're politically elected, to actually cut that debt?
And the Italian budget now is perfectly in order. You know, we have an outstanding debt that is 120% of GDP, so it's very heavy. But it was the same when we entered into the euro. You know, we didn't move. It's the international situation that changed it. You know, and what is happening now in Europe, not only in Italy but overall Europe and even outside Europe, that the policies of the government are completely constrained by the international finance movement. You know, you mentioned that we need growth and stability together. You know, but how can you get it when you're? I think that our sovereignty is limited now.
Are you talking about a lack of sovereignty because of the fiscal framework that the EU leaders are trying to push through to try and solve some of the ills in the Eurozone crisis? Or are you talking about the fact that some countries are getting just priced out of the bond markets?
No. I am, when I talk of lack of sovereignty, you have to consider it literally. Let's say the governments, in the idea of the modern state, they take the decision for the country. Now they cannot take the decision for the country because they are limited by this environment. And this is why it's clear the outcome for Europe is only to stick together, to become as big as the United States or China, and so you will not be attacked and your sovereignty will be safe. So we keep sovereignty only if we bring the sovereignty at a European level.
Is it worth saving the Eurozone at any cost?
Once you pose the question in this way, the word any cost, then obviously there must be some cost where it's not worth it. But the question is, can one deal with it in an acceptable cost? But in order to go about it, let me start by fully agreeing with my good friend Min Zhu, which says the choice so to speak, between austerity and growth is a fallacious choice. You do not have this choice. If you could choose who would like to go for austerity if you can have growth, that's not the issue. And you know, semantics create content. I do suggest that we replace the word austerity with the word responsibility. And we replace the word growth with the word sustainable growth. And once you put it in this content, and you have sustainable growth as an objective, you are forced to think into the medium term and not take shortcuts that give you 1 year boost with long debt thereafter. In terms of the euro, you know, we are talking here about euro is not just a currency. Euro is a system. What we see now, people say there is a crisis in the euro. Others say crisis in the euro system. Euro is a manifestation of the system. Let's face it, at the present time, the members of the Eurozone are very, very different in many dimensions.